about that. And I will hand it over to you, and I'm looking forward to listening to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, so I'm just going to share. Okay, so thank you for your attention. If I was only doing classes online and had to listen to someone waffle on with their own story at 10 a.m., I'm not sure I'd show up. So thank you for your attention already. So as Emma said, I now work in Shopify. I'm also a director of the Chamber of Commerce here in Cavan. I'm a part-time tutor in the night school then in Cavan Institute. I have my own business called Breffney Digital, which is kind of part of the end of the story I'm about to tell you. I also run a pretty large community of entrepreneurs all over Ireland, which is called the We're All Business Group. And I'm also a mammy to 3 kids. So that's where I am today, but it's a really weird backdoor story where none of this looked like it should have happened, because I was in, so basically how the hell did we end up here? I was in retail management in the likes of Pennies and Dunn's and Heaton's from I was very, very young. And then when I was expecting my first child when I was 21, I decided the sensible thing to do would be to buy a house. My husband, partner at the time, is from Cavan, so we came up here to buy a house at a cheaper house price. And I stayed working in retail for a bit. Now, the entrepreneurial thing, there is an argument as to whether this is like nature or nurture. It's just in some people, and then for other people, it's something they work on or learn how entrepreneurship actually works. So that's me at 15 as part of a school competition where we got to the All-Ireland final. That was my first introduction to what the heck entrepreneurship even meant. I don't come from like a family that runs a business. Some people are just kind of born into entrepreneurship and see that hustle and that grind all the time. I didn't. I come from a very family of just people who are PAYE employees of all sorts, but no real insight as to how a business starts, grows, works, fails, any of that. So we had our kind of project there in school, which was making ID cards, because the gap we saw in the market was every time we tried to get on a bus into Dublin, if we had our makeup on and were dressed up nice, we couldn't get child fare, even though we were entitled to it by our age, because we couldn't prove how young we were. So everybody could prove when they reached the age to vote or drink or buy cigarettes or whatever, but nobody could prove that they were underage. So there was no Garda ID, because you're going back not that long. But we came up with this ID card, which was kind of verified by the school that was your date of birth from the roll. And we were the Dunshaughlin Laminating Company. It's a bit mad. But anyway, that's really where at 15, I realized so much that goes into a business. So I'll just take it back then to when I was working in retail. I had a horrific time in the last workplace that I worked in with bullying, adult bullying in the workplace. Hard to believe it happens, but it does. It's quite common actually. And for the sake of my mental health, I left that job. I'd also been through some harrowing bereavements in my personal life, and I just started to reprioritize, still in my very early 20s. So I stayed at home, and at that stage we had 2 children, and I was minding 3 more children for other people as their childminder. And my aunt, who has special needs, she has Down syndrome, moved in with us, and I was her full-time carer. So this is where the Michelle I am today, and the e-commerce and the business and the marketing and all that stuff, none of that was part of my life then. But somewhere inside everybody, there's the potential to start a business, to run a business, to grow in all sorts of different ways. And I think it's very important not to see things as the old-fashioned career paths anymore and say, right, well, I'm going to study this and do that, because nothing is certain. And I think, if anything, this pandemic has shaken every system up, the education system, employment, capitalism, economics, everything is on its head right now. And even back when things were just tickety-boo, I can't stress enough how you don't have to follow what someone else's journey was to get to the same place. Your road will twist and turn, and you just have to go with it. So the reason there's a picture of all sorts of kids' clothes on the screen, while I was at home with my children, other people's children, and Barbara living with us and everything, we went about making some more space here in the house because it was getting a bit overcrowded. And we looked at converting the attic. And I had been quite frugal and keeping all the kids' clothes as hand-me-downs. And then at this stage, we had our third child, Sarah, and the boys' clothes weren't going to be passed down to her. So I went about clearing out the attic with the hopes to making it into another bedroom. And there were 17 black bags of clothes in perfect condition that had been, some would say hoarded, some would say very wisely kept. So I went about putting them on Done Deal. So there was no e-commerce site of my own. There was no business plan. This was never supposed to happen. This was just clear out the attic and try and get some cash for the stuff you're getting rid of. And as I would put stuff up on Done Deal, it was absolutely snapped up, right? Because it was good quality stuff and it was also photographed well. So that's a screenshot from Done Deal. And you've some idea there that the stuff is clean, but you don't know underneath. Is there holes in the pockets? Is there stains on them? You don't really know. So I took really good photographs and wrote really good descriptions. And now I know that that was the beginning of me starting to understand how things sell online. And I was probably using some of the expertise I had in offline retail, where things have to be merchandised well, things have to be displayed well, lit well. So I would sell stuff by the bundle to get rid of it, because that was my goal here, was to make some space. And then when I got through all 17 black bags, people were driving from 2 counties away to meet me in a little car park to get these clothes for their kids. Because at that point, you're talking about 2012, people were really feeling the pinch of what had happened in 2008, 2009. So the kind of the spin-off income that people had from the construction industry was now starting to feel it. And people were just getting smarter with their money and realizing that shopping as a hobby was no longer possible, but they still wanted decent quality, nice stuff for their kids. And kids grow out of clothes at the same rate as they always did. It doesn't matter what the clothes cost. So everybody's house is full of these black bags. I had them in the attic. People have them in garages, wardrobes, under beds. Houses everywhere with children in them are full of kids' clothes that are in perfectly good condition. So I started to see that as a possible supply instead of market. And I thought, okay, what if I buy them from other people and then sell them to the people who need them? So it wasn't a charity project. This was very much I want to make a profit. But instead of clearing out the space from the 17 black bags we had, I now had my attic full again, the shed, the landing, the hall, anywhere that I could have stuff. I had plastic containers. I used to organize things by size. And I had a market stall. So I would be out there at like 5:30 in the morning on the weekends, setting up my stall. I had a Facebook page, and people would buy stuff at the market, take my card, like it on Facebook. And then from then on, it was so much easier for them to just contact me on Facebook, send me a message, comment under a picture of something I'd put up, and it was gone before I even got to the market. So I had to be careful then that I didn't oversell online and have nothing left in person. So that was starting to shape up like a little business while being mother to 3, childminder to 3, and full-time carer. And the house was chaos again because of everyone else's stuff. So I called that business Thrift Avenue. So like Fifth Avenue, but Thrift Avenue. And I was in the process of trying to see what help I could get with that. Now, I was coming from living on carer's allowance, so I had no savings. I had no capital to put into this business, nothing. And what I found out very early was that if you apply for any sort of funding, you have to have money to get money. And it's, I don't know, ethically, is it right or wrong that if somebody's business is viable and they have all the passion, determination, work ethic, should they also have to have money in the bank? But that's the way most of the systems with grants and loans and any sort of access to funding, you kind of have to have something of your own to put in, and I didn't. So whatever I made on any given week was what I put into buying next week's stuff, and it was very difficult to keep it going. Plus, it was very difficult logistically here because I didn't have a storage facility or a warehouse or a anywhere that I could do all the sorting and packing. So during that same time, I went to, it's not the local enterprise office. Every county also has a local development company. They're called different things in different places. And the enterprise office is kind of for people who are in manufacture with export potential, whereas the development company is for people who don't fit that criteria. So it could be that they are self-employed, kind of, think of your plumber or your tiler or someone like that who wants to go out and set up their own business, maybe just employ themselves, maybe employ one or two other people, but very small businesses and not manufacturing and not exporting anything. So I went to them, and sometimes in coming across all these brick walls of you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't have this, you can't have that, sometimes you'll meet a person who, even though they're working within a system that's full of no's, there's a little bit of hope. So I met a person there, and he just loved the whole idea. It just ticks so many boxes, and it still does to this day, because it's environmentally friendly, it's its own economy. There's, like I say, a constant supply of stuff because kids keep growing out of clothes, and everyone has this problem of where do we get rid of the stuff we don't need anymore, and other people are looking for a bargain. And if somebody's willing to put in the work and be that person in the middle, there is actually profit to be made. So he loved the idea, and there was a scheme where I wasn't investment in my business as such, but there was a way for me to, at this stage, my caring arrangement was coming to an end, and Barbara was going to live with my parents. So there was a way for me to keep the equivalent of my social welfare payment for a couple of years while I got on my feet with this business. It's not an investment in the business. It's not actually helping you with the cash in the business at all. It just means that you know that you can buy the groceries next week, even if your business didn't make any money. So I went on that with this business plan, but very, very quickly, that business plan had to do what we would call now in the industry a pivot. At the time, it doesn't feel like a very strategic pivot. It feels like, Jesus Christ, the wheels are falling off. What are we going to do? But I'll move on to the next crazy project, which was funky crayons. So one of the kids was home from school sick. There's Elliot. And I had seen this idea on like Pinterest or somewhere. I had all sorts of ideas saved for keeping the kids busy. And now when I was a childminder, I was all into it. Like, so everybody's struggling with the homeschooling thing now. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. So you gather up all the bits of broken crayons around the house, you melt them in silicone bun cases, and you end up with multicolored crayons. So I did that one day. This is during the craziness of the clothes everywhere. I'm working on that business plan and how hectic life was anyway. And they were great, but in taking those silicone bun cases out of the press where we'd all our baking bits, I had like a Halloween mold and a Christmas mold. And I just got this idea where I thought, God, you could actually melt these into all sorts of cool shapes. So I ordered an alphabet mold on eBay. And when it came, the kids all made their name in crayons. And at that stage, we'd used up all the bits of broken crayons from around the house. And when some of the kids I was minding were collected, the next day, one of the mums said, where did you get those crayons in the shape of their name? And I was like, Jesus, we made them. I taught them about liquids and solids, and about heat, and about melting, and about reshaping, and about silicone, and all sorts of things. But the kids hadn't told them any of that. And she was like, you could sell them. Like, they're amazing. They look like you got them in a shop somewhere. So I lay in bed that night going, you could sell them. And then this is where, I don't know if the entrepreneurial thing is a gene If it is it a faulty gene or what? Because logically, I should have been trying to make money out of the clothes thing, get it out of my house, have some sort of a steady plan. But instead, I was just like, oh, here's another great idea. So this very quickly became another Facebook page. I had no website for them. And when I was buying in fresh crayons at this stage. I wasn't melting down broken ones anymore. But as soon as I would put up a new shape or anybody's name, so I could put Emma spelled out in big chunky crayons. So I had these kind of shapes. As soon as I would put something up on Facebook, I was inundated with orders. Now, it's the sort of thing now in digital marketing that you would dream of and doesn't happen anymore. This was all organic. There was no paid ads behind it. There was no website to drive them to. It was just word of mouth amongst mammies. And the two things tied so nicely together, the kids' clothes and this. So in that business plan that I had gone out with for Thrift Avenue, there was a plan to turn that from a market stall into a physical shop and a website. And one line in that business plan was that I had this product that I could also stock in that shop. And that was these. But these quickly took over my life. I had to take all the clothes to one of those terrible cash for kilo places just to get rid. And in all the spaces where I had clothes stored, I had boxes of different molds. I had packaging. I had stickers. I had the boxes that they went out to the courier with. And my kitchen became a crayon factory overnight. I live in a 3-bed semi. I have no space that I could actually say, right, that's separate. So these were really, really popular, and I knew there was huge potential in them. I had loads of copycats. I had loads of people starting up Facebook pages, copying my shapes, my ideas, my name, all sorts. I realized that I wasn't the first person to actually come up with the idea of getting funky molds and making crayons out of them, even though I came up with the idea myself when we were doing the recycling project. So all I could do to be really original, like there's 7 billion people on the planet. So even when you come up with a really original idea, somebody's probably thought of it already. So to be really original, I started making my own molds. So I had like hurls and schlitters, and I had Minecraft ones, which I nearly got sued over, but just to be original and be something different that someone else couldn't copy. So even if they saw mine and thought, oh yeah, I'll do that, they couldn't go on Amazon and go on eBay and find that mold and have the same crayons on their page next week, because we were making them from scratch. So it got extremely busy, it got extremely chaotic, and I didn't understand. Again, I don't come from this background, and I didn't go into this with any sort of research or planning. I jumped in with both feet, and I didn't understand that the amount of profit that you need to make to grow a business. So I was selling them for more than it cost me to make them, but I was paying myself that, and it was very small because I needed some sort of income, because at this stage, everything else has dried up and I have to live on whatever I can make. So you also have to stay competitive in the market. So you can't start charging €20 for a little set of crayons, because no one's going to buy them. And somebody else in their kitchen is going to sell them for 12. But without that cash injection, again, no savings, no, a little pot of money there to invest in equipment, in better ways of making them. It was very much just made to order and just keep lashing them out. And the excitement of the really fast growth at the start wore off. And I thought, this is actually like a massive chore now. And I had myself backed into a corner where I had caused all this popularity and could just about keep up with this week's orders. So I couldn't actually, I used to stop marketing. I used to stop putting up posts that would attract more likes and more messages. I used to I used to have to put a post saying like that the order book is closed for a couple of weeks, just to let myself catch up on myself, because customer service was really important to me. So I didn't want to take loads of orders, have terrible shipping times, let people down, make mistakes. I was the only person doing this, remember? So like I do remember once sending the wrong order to the wrong people. I just literally put the wrong labels on the boxes, wrong address labels on the boxes. So the order was made up perfect, the right kids' names, the right everything, and just put the wrong address labels on the boxes, sent them off with the courier amongst 20 or 30 other boxes, and didn't know until one of them emailed to say, I've got my order, but I don't know what the heck this is. Who are these kids? And she had loads of stuff in there for a birthday party, little packets of birthday party favors, which had gone to the other end of Dublin. So that was like a refund for both and whatever, but it's also a huge disappointment that this thing that you've put your trust into and spent your money on and ordered in plenty of time has now arrived just in time for the party, and it's the wrong stuff. So there's no time for me to fix that mistake. So that used to stress me out. That would stress me out more than anything if a customer wasn't 100% happy. So in the process of growing that business, I never enjoyed making the product. I never enjoyed the physical stuff. That's not, people used to say like, oh, you're so creative. Oh my God, you must love doing this. You're so arts and craftsy. I'm not, absolutely not. I hated it. I hated burning my fingers with the wax. I hated that end of it. I was very proud of the product that came out the other end of it. And I didn't mind, like, say, taking those photos. That kind of stuff was fine. The geeky stuff was me, but the actual making of it, no. It's just so repetitive. I don't like repetitive things. So I learned so much about Facebook and Instagram and Twitter in that time that it was really when paid ads on social became a thing. So like when I started, I had almost 100% of my likes would see my posts. It was crazy, if they were good. And I just very quickly got the knack of what makes people tick. And I knew my audience. I knew the Irish mammy inside out because I was one. I knew that they were planning birthday parties in the middle of the night when they're up feeding the baby. I knew things about their lifestyle and their mindset that you would have to pay a fortune for that kind of research. So I was lucky in that I was quite like my customer, but also had the self-awareness to be able to take a step back and say those things. Sometimes people start a business and they are like their customer, but they don't have the self-awareness or the ability to take a step back and say, okay, what is my behavior actually doing here? So in terms of marketing them, they were always a very wholesome brand, in that I would never, like I used to get requests to do willy shaped ones for hen party favors and stuff, and I would never cross that boundary into those. It didn't matter what money they were offering. This was a child's brand, and that's the way it was going to stay. There was no such thing as boys ones and girls ones. There was wedding favor ones, and before we had marriage equality, I used to do like a groom and a groom, or a bride and a bride, and a bride and a groom in the pictures. So people knew what I stood for, and I knew what I stood for, and I never had to backtrack then. It sounds over the top to some people when you say, geez, they're crayons, like, but I knew that if this grew to what I dreamed it would be, that those brand values are really important, and they're important from day one. So e-commerce, as in, like, so I was selling them through Facebook messages first of all. Then that just got too much and too messy, where if somebody was just chit-chatting over and back in messages, they got bumped up to the top of my inbox, and somebody who had just politely put their order in could get missed. So I opened like an Etsy store while I was working on a Shopify store of my own. And I found both to be really good at that time. Etsy was expensive in how much they took from the sale, but it seemed to be a good algorithm, and in terms of a marketing funnel, a customer goes to Etsy already at the intent stage. They know roughly what they want. So they're a couple of steps further into that funnel. Maybe not necessarily your funnel, but they're definitely, they're in shopping mode, and they know that they want a handmade product, and they know what the occasion is. And that helps. So they're not just randomly tripping across you. And then obviously on the Shopify store, it was much better for me because I was keeping much more of the price. And I could drive everything from this social media noise I had over to there. So for me, e-commerce changed everything because it was accessible to me. So I was this stay-at-home mother and carer. There's no barrier to entry with e-commerce. So I couldn't go and open a shop. I couldn't, I could just about manage the market stall of the clothes because it was on a Sunday. I couldn't even travel around and do different markets. So this was just so accessible, because once you have an internet connection, you're good to go. Nobody's saying to you, yeah, but you have to have this, you have to sign a lease, you have to have money, you have to hire people, you don't have to anything. You can just give it a go. It was free. So I've explained a bit there about how hard it was to get funding, but there's a whole, I'd say, a day's talk in that alone of all the barriers I came across in terms of money. And it was free. Starting a Facebook page was free. Okay, there's, the fee to run a Shopify store, or Etsy taking their fees and stuff, but there's no big entry price. Again, you can just give things a go. It was 24/7, which was really important for me because I didn't have any block of time that I could invest in this either. I couldn't say, okay, I'm going to work between this time and this time, because even when the bigger kids were at school, I had Barbara, I had kids at my feet. So I used to find little windows of 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, an hour really late at night. I was in control of it though. So I probably was working 4 to 5 hours a day on it, but not in one chunk of time. And if you think about all the people who are at home with other responsibilities, whether it's caring, whether it's parenting, whether it's looking after an elderly relative, whatever it is, maybe they have a disability themselves that prohibits them from a totally free lifestyle. E-commerce and access to these tools is so empowering for people who otherwise are not allowed or can't. It was scalable from day one. So I had customers in every county in Ireland, all 32 of them, and 13 other countries, which you could never do if you opened up a brick and mortar shop. You could never have that kind of scalability from the get-go. The internet also changed me and my life because I had been bullied out of the career I was in. I chose to stay at home for a while, and all of these things, these mad things happened. But I found and built a community of people online that I really don't know how you would do that in real life without meeting people who have a common interest online. Like, I live in rural Ireland, so I have friends and great neighbours and everything around me, and I'm very involved in the community in Cavan. But not everybody gets you. And as soon as you can join groups, join chats, just realize that you're not in this alone, that other people are having the same challenges. Other people are there to shout your success in a way that your friends and family possibly don't. And sometimes it's really good intentions in your friends and family. They want to keep you safe. They want to protect you from disappointment, from failure, from heartache, because it is a roller coaster of emotions doing this stuff. And with good intentions, they'll say to you, they'll talk you out of things, or they'll question your sanity and be like, why don't you just get a job? Or why don't you just, just do the easy thing? Or why don't you just drop ship products? Like, why is your heart and soul in this handmade thing? And it can sound like an insult, and it can be very offensive. And what they actually mean is, mind yourself. You could get hurt here. This might not work. So they're trying to find safer ways for you to do the same thing, but because they don't get it. And I found my tribe in Facebook groups and on Twitter. Actually, I've built up a good, a lot of relationships and a good network on Twitter. Twitter's changed since now. It's a toxic, weird place. But back then, Twitter was a bit friendlier. And I think that's really important for people to realize as well, that these digital marketing tools are not always social media, and even your own store. It's not always about money. It's not always about sales. Sometimes they also need to be used to build up yourself so that you can believe in keeping the project going. And then the last one there, when I was selling online, even though there were costs involved, if I was to put that product on the shelf in a retailer, they want at least 50% of the price. So you have to figure out a reasonable retail price that the customer will actually take it to the till and buy it. You have to allow for the fact that there's going to be breakages in the shop. There's going to be shoplifting in the shop. You have to allow for that kind of loss. And they want at least 50% goes straight to the retailer. And of course it does. They have to keep their lights on, pay their staff, make their money. But with e-commerce, once you take your costs out of it, it's a much healthier margin. But they were all the ways that doing all of this online was absolutely life-changing. And then all the networking that I did. So like I say, I joined Facebook groups, the Twitter chat. So Emma alluded to it there at the start. There was a Twitter chat with hashtag Irish Biz Party, and it was for years a way for Irish SMEs to connect. And I got very involved in the kind of running of that Twitter party. So I went from being this kind of wallflower in the background, wondering who should I be asking for permission here to do this, to stepping up and being, actually, do you know what? I don't need to ask anybody for permission. I can just, I can not only take part in all these things and call myself an entrepreneur and call myself a business person, but I can also help others. So the conference that Emma was talking about in Fermanagh, that was the day that we announced that Chris from a company in Kerry called the Brand Geeks and myself were taking that over, and we have been managing that community ever since and have rebranded it in the last few months to We're All Business. At the moment, it's just kind of trying to support each other through the crisis. But it has always been that. It has always been a supportive place where Irish small business owners can let off steam, help each other out, buy and sell from each other. And yeah, it's a lovely community. So that came from those Twitter chats. PR opportunities. I never paid anybody for PR, but I've been on TV, all the newspapers, radio shows, all those things, and that all came from Twitter connections. I won an award for branding. So my branding guy who worked on that logo and color scheme and everything, met him through Twitter. And then just contacts. I know you can Google and you can, you're all studying digital marketing, and I'm raving about digital marketing and how to be found. And obviously people's SEO and ads and everything is very important in them being found. But that word of mouth referral is still worth gold, So I have contacts in so many different things that I might never buy from, but I could send them a customer, and likewise they'll do the same for me. And it's not necessarily that anyone's keeping track of, I've done you a favor, so you have to do me a favor. It's just the way it is out there in that kind of ecosystem where people just want to help each other. And then in the long term, it led to my new business. So we'll get to that. So that was one of the awards that I won 2 years in a row. They were campaigns started in the UK, and they're pretty big now. And they award retailers online and offline who don't segregate packaging, marketing, anything into boys' toys and girls' toys. And I'm so passionate about that, because I really believe that one of the biggest factors for why we're treated so differently as adults in terms of the pay gap and opportunities, and why there aren't enough women on boards and in government, is because we're told from day one, those toys are for you and those toys are for you. And girls are told to look after the babies and make the dinner, and the boys are told to go and fix things and break things and build things. And it's wrong. So This is why I never had boys ones and girls ones in the crayon thing. That came from Twitter, which was my first go on TV. So like, don't do it by halves. If you're going to go on the telly, do it in Irish. A researcher from the Roisin show on TG Carr tweeted that they were looking for an Irish female a female entrepreneur who spoke Irish to go on the Roisin show for Women's Enterprise Day. And I answered the tweet and immediately went, what the hell have I done? I have no business calling myself that. Like, who do I actually think I am? And immediately went into that imposter syndrome thing that's so dangerous. The only part of that I was sure of was female. I was like, am I an entrepreneur? Is that really what they mean by that? They probably mean like some tech whiz who's like started the next Stripe or something, and here's me with my little box of crayons. My Irish was very, very rusty, and I just rolled with it. They called me the next day. I saw the Galway number coming up and thought it was my sister, and answered, and then immediately again went, God, what am I doing? That conversation went okay, and I thought if I could continue the conversation in Irish over the phone, it should be a little bit easier in person. Then remembered, no, there'll be a TV camera in your face. But I got through it, and there were so many chances there to back out of that opportunity. But it was a great opportunity because obviously some people only heard of it for the first time on that show. But even my Facebook fans and all those kind of my Twitter followers, people were so excited for me and sharing it for me, and sharing it like, oh, these are the ones we got for so-and-so's birthday, and there they are on the telly. It was just such a milestone. It was great. I was in the Independent a few times, so the likes of their back to school supplement, they had me now as, I don't know whether they keep you on lists or they just remember you, but as soon as you're engaging with people on Twitter all the time, just staying interested when it's not necessarily, hi, will you send this out for me? Here's a press release. Can I have a go in the paper? There was never an ask from me. I was more just kind of keeping those relationships alive. So Emma's just saying there are a lot of journalists hang out on Twitter. 100%. And this is where I'm saying I wasn't being discovered by accident. I had a Twitter list of Irish journalists, and I would go through it and read their tweets and retweet them if it was appropriate. You should be careful that you're not just, okay, I'll go in here and I'll retweet a few of these and then I'll ask them to do something for me. You have to be genuine about it. So if I ever came across something that I thought was an interesting story, I would send it to them. And I'd still do that with the local press here. And as soon as you keep building those relationships with genuinely helpful stuff, sometimes it's funny stuff, sometimes it's something that will help them. They're craving content all the time. So if you're known as this helpful person who sends them good content, or who will answer their questions if they just want, the voice of an Irish SME as part of an article, it's a win-win, because you're doing something that helps them with their job, and in return you're remembered, and they'll give you that little plug when they can, when it fits in with what they're writing or have on their show. So the likes of the back to school supplement, my children were delighted getting into their school uniforms in the middle of July, but there we are. And so they sent the photographer out to the house, they take that picture, and then that goes in. But it was my back to school tips. So they're happy to let me put in, the Funky Crowns logo is in the thing. Obviously the product is in the picture, but it's part of the little magazine that comes with the newspaper. And it was Charlie Weston, who's like the financial guy. So it's about back to school money saving tips. So I had a blog post with 5 or 6 money saving tips for back to school. Obviously back to school, these gorgeous crayons, it was a big season for me. So I was plugging it early with here's some content about back to school that's useful, valuable, helpful to my ideal customer, who will hopefully share it in some of her mum's groups or have a good read of it or tag her friend in the comments or whatever. And Charlie Weston came across it on Twitter and was like, oh my God, can we use this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Do you need a picture? Do you need anything? And they said, well, actually, here's the photographer. Would you just arrange a time with her? So I ended up with this photo shoot, amazing plug in the Independent, because I delivered value first, if that makes sense. I gave them something that was useful to them, and then they don't mind plugging me in return. But it's not an ad, it's not a blatant buy this product, because there's something in it for their reader. And then if they want to buy the product, fine. But it's not directly related back to the product. It's more to do with the lifestyle and mindset of the customer, which is a parent of school-going children. Emma says being featured, maybe you can all read the chats. Yeah, to everyone. Okay, stop reading them out. The thing about being featured in newspapers is no one I know buys the newspaper and reads it. But if you have that opportunity to be in the newspaper for those who do read it, and then you can share that on your social media, there's something about traditional TV and well-known newspapers that people go absolutely nuts for. They're like, oh my God, you are now, it's like a stamp of validation. It's like, you're real now, I can buy from you. It's bizarre, but it's the way it is. There's people I know who would never put on RTE and watch it. But if someone they know says, oh my God, I'm going to be on RTE for 3 minutes of a segment, they'll tune in, they'll record it. There'll be like a ceremony about watching this thing. So I don't know. It's also about crisscrossing them and making sure that your social media stuff is mentioned in the traditional, and the traditional piece is some sort of, whether it's a screenshot or even just I've shared pictures of the physical newspaper, or like a little boomerang of the newspaper page being opened and be like, oh, there we are again, something like that. Like I say, it just validates you, and you can also end up with nice pictures for the house that were taken for the paper. So there's another opportunity that came from Twitter. So lots of people love or hate Gary Vee. But I got to spend an hour with him at the Dublin Tech Summit, which was just one of those things that you're like, I went from a mammy, a carer, a childminder with mad ideas to someone appreciating mad ideas. So he loves all my mad ideas, from the Thrift Avenue thing. You know, he's always encouraging people to buy stuff at like yard sales and flip it on eBay, and that whole business model, that whole concept of buy it cheap and sell it for a profit. I mean, it's the basis of all commerce, and the crayon thing, and yeah, just the fact that I'm a serial head case entrepreneur. So I had this kind of spin-off idea then, where it was a birthday candle that works afterwards as a crayon. Now, it was probably a bit early to the game in terms of climate change and how aware we became in the last 18 months or so about waste and plastic and what we put in landfill. So that was my biggest selling point of these, was that we all get that number shaped candle, we all use it for 30 seconds, and we throw it in a drawer or we throw it in the bin. And if it goes in the drawer, at most it gets used for another 30 seconds and eventually ends up in the bin. So really they were another Funky Crayons product, but I started to think that this had potential of its own. So created another brand called Wickeds, which is like Wick Kids, the same kind of, same branding guy worked on it, so that the Funky Crayon stuff was so recognizable to so many people at this stage that they would buy into this. But I decided this time I'm not going down the same road of making it by hand at home, having half the country copy me, no investment in it, blah, 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 and just winging it. I decided this time I'm going to learn from my mistakes with Funky Crayons, and I'm going to try and do this a different way. So I decided I'd crowdfund. Now, my mistake with crowdfunding was, again, I was early to the game. So I'm one of those early adopters, and that's fine if the people are also early adopters. But my Facebook likes and my Twitter followers and my Instagram wasn't very big for me. It wasn't that big of a platform at that time like it is now. There was no stories. But the problem with crowdfunding was people were crowdfunding for like gadgets or tech in a big way. Or there was no big success story in a child's product like that. And my Facebook likes were the mammies. And this is where having a number of followers is not the most important thing. So I had lots of followers on Twitter, lots of likes on Facebook, but they were two completely different audiences. And I didn't appreciate this enough until I crowdfunded and it failed. Spoiler alert, it failed. So my Facebook likes were mammies who loved the product, but didn't love crowdfunding, didn't understand, hold on, it's asking me for my credit card. What is this website? That's not your website. Is this safe for like a $5 backing? There was a lot of questions, a lot of messages, a lot of trying to hold their hand and make sure that they felt safe. And they're like, no, I'll buy it when it comes out. Don't know about this. Didn't trust it. And then my Twitter followers were more people who were more into tech and marketing and commerce and got it, but had no need for the product. So they were just a total mismatch there. So it only raised like, I think 30 something, 40% of the goal, and therefore I didn't get anything. So another learning experience. There's a lot of failures in this story, but they've all brought me to where I am. And it's when people get disheartened that they give up, and I didn't. So that's the conference in Fermanagh that I'm always talking about. So in the meantime, I had that I was now running as well. And then this is Dragon's Den. So in the end of 2015, December 2015, I had, through that Irish Biz Party community and through all the Twitter followers and whatever, people used to come to me all the time and say, look, I'm stuck with Facebook. How do I? And I would give them content ideas. I would give them marketing strategies. I would give them technical help with how Facebook Ads Manager worked. I would give them SEO tips. Whatever it was, the conversation would always end up with, you're really good at this stuff. How do I? But there's no, oh yeah, you just press this button. It's a long conversation. So I would give people an hour, 2 hours of my time, not charge any money. And to me, they were friends I built up online. And then if they were ringing me and asking me stuff, of course I was going to help them. I never thought of myself as a marketing consultant. I never thought of myself as a marketing expert. I never thought of myself as too big for my boots. I was just about okay with calling myself an entrepreneur. So from kind of 2013 to 15, in those funky crayons days, as I exploded on social media and did so well online from the kitchen table with no experience in that stuff, but I would Google everything to death, and I learned myself. And learning is like, you know yourself, you do whatever you do in your class, but then you have to do so much self-directed learning as well. And I just ate this stuff up. I just absolutely love how this all works and how it keeps changing and evolving. And I would give that kind of advice and help to people. And then a brand that you probably all know now, Elf on the Shelf, was launching in Ireland. And I knew the distributor from Irish Biz Party. And he asked me if I would take over the social media campaign for the launch. Now, obviously, it's a very seasonal product. So I said, okay, this is where I need to put my big girl pants on and say, I'm not doing this as a favor. I'm not doing this for, for free discounts or, goodie bags. I'm charging a fee here. And I did. And because it was a short-term campaign, there was a very clear, this is when it starts, this is when it ends. There were very clear brand guidelines from the mother company in the States. And I absolutely kicked ass on that. Launched them, drove unbelievable sales, way beyond all the projections and targets and goals. It was amazing. And that gave me the confidence in myself that, yeah, I can do this, I can charge money and not feel guilty about it. So I was doing kind of stuff like that, as well as the crayons, as well as trying to get this Wickeds thing to work. And I had decided, look, as much as I love funky crayons, as much as it is it's like another child, I am going to have to be realistic and say I have to pay my bills. And my family can't go on with me with these crazy ideas year after year. The house is full of other people's clothes. The house is full of crayon wax. The house is full of, just madness. But there's no sign of loads of money coming in from any of these things. They're just about breaking even. So I decided, look, I probably do have so many skills built up now in marketing and e-commerce that I could go into that as a business of its own and actually make an income, because what I charge, I'll be just spending my time on. I won't have to buy materials, packaging, all that kind of those costs. So I decided I would get through the Christmas period, which was obviously insane as a children's product. And then I would pack it in come January. I would just stop marketing and just let it go quiet and go all in on the marketing stuff. And I had enough of a network built up that I knew lots of businesses. I was a member of a chamber of commerce. And I knew that I wouldn't be stuck for where I would find clients. I knew I had a great testimonial now from such a recognized brand as Elf on the Shelf. And I was confident enough that I could make this work and actually pay myself a living wage out of it. And then the Dragon's Den application came up and I said, oh, Jesus, okay, maybe I'll just give it one more shot. So I went on Dragon's Den. So that's Elliot that was melting the crayons, first of all. Now, on the night, so we filmed in February and then it doesn't get aired until April. And I was in the first episode that was aired. The last one filmed and the first one aired. So I had the shortest gap that anybody has. But that for me was the torture. Presenting, not a bother. The actual pitch, the preparation, sitting down with the accountant beforehand, going through all the numbers, all that was fine. It's the waiting around on the day and the waiting around before you're allowed to talk about it. Then you can tell people that you were on, but you can't tell people how it went. And then finally, once it had aired, I was like, okay, I can actually talk about it. Now, on the night, so that's a tweet from Barry O'Sullivan, one of the dragons, saying that if it was his birthday, he'd need 2 candles. And the lovely wad of, I don't know if it's even real money, on the table. Barry O'Sullivan took over the RTE Twitter account. The Dragons took it in turns to take over the RTE Twitter account the night that it aired. And that screenshot means more to me than that money on the table, that somebody I looked up to so much in the tech world thought that of me. So what the Dragons all said, that's not aired, because it's edited down to 8 minutes, even though I was in there for an hour and a half. When I walked in, they all knew me. They knew my brand, they knew my Twitter handle, they all knew me. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but for different reasons, they didn't invest in the product. For some of them, I didn't have the supply chain set up enough, even though I had a supplier in China ready, I had a distributor in the States ready, but I had no contract signed with anybody because I couldn't fulfill those contracts without the investment. So I wasn't going to go putting myself in that jeopardy. But anyway, for different reasons, they didn't invest. But they did all give me unbelievable feedback and said, we know you, we know your brand, we know your product, we know you, we know what you're about, what you stand for, who you're connected to. Like, you're very well known in Irish business circles now. So if you can do all of that from the kitchen table for your own brand and your own self, why don't you do that for other people? Because people will already have the trust in you that you've done this for yourself and your own brand. And go and do that and make some bloody money. And I couldn't say on television, yeah, okay, I think I'll do that. So I'll just pack all this shit up. Sorry for bothering you. I had to be all in on this on the day, and I was all in on it. And it was very emotional getting the no after no. I did cry at the end of it. They aired that, of course. So I didn't get the money, but I came out of there thinking, oh my God, I can do this. Because I'd done the elf on the shelf thing, and I believed in myself a bit. And then I'd go, yeah, but they might not be like that. And what if I take their money and then, you know, the campaign doesn't bring results, or they're not happy, or, you know, they leave a complaint instead of a testimonial? You worry about all the things that could go wrong. And I suppose when I sold the product, I knew what you were getting physically into your hand. Whereas when you sell your time and your service, so if you go in after you do this master's, if you're selling yourself as a service, it's a tricky one, because you can't see it and they can't see it. So they have to put their trust in you that you're going to deliver results. You have to have a boundary there that says there's no guaranteed results. So I'm going to put all this effort and work in, but you have to work with me. You have to trust and believe that it could take 6 months to see any results from SEO work I'm doing. Doesn't mean I'm not doing anything. So there's a lot of worry that went to it turning into a service-based business. So there were also some funny tweets on the night. Because I had my child on with me, I was like following Twitter very closely on the night, and I was searching out for his name plus the hashtag of the show. So Ellie came on, we sang happy birthday, he blew out the candle, and then he leaves and I pitch. So I love that one. Poor Ellie just got sacked on his birthday. And then this one, thank you, Elliot. Now return to the car. It's not really your fucking birthday. I actually am the only like on those tweets, because I did actually find them funny. So again, same branding guy worked with me on Breffney Digital. Now it's called Breffney because I'm in Cavan, and my thought process was I'll start with local businesses first, because I can call in and out to them easier. I know their market, I know what they have or haven't done online so far, and I'll start there. And I didn't want to call this new marketing business my name, because I didn't know where it was going to go. So I thought if it ends up being a team of people and I've called it after me, and then they're not necessarily getting me, they could be being passed on to a staff member, that's not great. I also wasn't comfortable with it being the Michelle show. So I went to Breffney Digital. I don't know where you're all based, whether you're all close to Limerick or around, but you know the way everywhere has its own, like everything in Kerry's the kingdom this and the kingdom that, and everything around this region is Breffney. So everything from your air conditioning fella to your mechanic, everything is Breffney in the name somewhere. So there's a kind of a trust that comes with that. Even though this was day one of a new business, there's a kind of it feels established. It feels like, okay, she's all right. So I went with that, and the logo is supposed to be like a smiley emoji, and it's also BD. Some people get that straight away, some people don't. And I went trading under that name then, and put myself out there as I know everything about social media, pass it over to me. And I had no problem getting clients because of the kind of tailwind of Dragon's Den, and people knew me already as she knows everything about that stuff. She knows everything about that stuff. Give her a buzz and give her a few €100. Different than just give her a buzz. So I had to be very careful that I made it clear to people, we can have a quick phone call. You know, we can have a kind of a what's the word, like an exploratory phone call, see what you actually need, but then I'll go and put a proposal together for you, and this is what it'll actually cost to get it done. So you have to find a line between sharing some ideas and some inspiration and get them excited by, oh yeah, okay, I actually like where you're going with that, but not actually give them the whole campaign for them to run off and do it themselves. Badly executed, but you know what I mean. So it's tricky. It's also tricky to actually get paid. So you can come up with a proposal, they'll over and back on it a bit, you agree on the monthly price, what you're going to be doing, some ideas, what you need from them in terms of content, access to their website and their socials. Great, and you get going, and they pay you the first month and the second month and then the third month for no apparent reason. They just are late, just when you've started to rely on it. So I made more money in Breffley Digital than I ever made from Funky Crayons or Thrift Avenue, but the inconsistency of when I was getting paid is very, very hard to live with. And at this stage, it kind of wasn't good enough to me that I was now gone from making practically no money to actually, yeah, this is what I'm making, but then, yeah, but I don't know when it's coming in. So you'd have 3 clients to pay you this week and you'd be delighted with life. And then you mightn't see a penny from anybody for 3 months for different reasons. Sometimes it's something as stupid as the person who processes your payment goes on holidays and doesn't leave anyone else to press the button. Shit like that drove me crazy. Because do you stop your work? Do you stop their marketing campaigns? Do you stop engaging with their customers? Do you switch things off that you have switched on? Like, how thick are you going to get over it? And then are they actually going to cough up? So it's hard to find a balance between what you're delivering that's invisible to them nearly, and taking care of yourself and making sure that you're being respected and paid. So since 2016 up to 2019, Breffley Digital was my full-time thing, and I did it from home. I didn't rent an office or anything. A lot of what I did then, I realized again, I don't know if they're mistakes or learnings, they're both, that I jumped in and took whatever clients came my way, over-delivered, undercharged, and then realized that that's it now. I can't take on any more because I only have so many hours in a day, and I was working too many hours in a day. So I had no work-life balance, and I was never not thinking about work. And I maxed myself out with how many I could take care of. So there's only so many people's social media you can take over. And I couldn't grow. So I was either going to have to hire someone else, train them in to my way of doing things, take the responsibility now of my work and someone else's, or I was going to have to change up the business model a bit. So this was a pinch me moment. So that great man is Peter McVerry from the Peter McVerry Trust, who helps people living in homelessness. And in this picture, the picture's taken in the Dillon Hotel, first of all, who are a 5-star hotel, who were my client for 2.5 years. That lady's Una O'Hagan from Mars Pharmacy, and I had trained her marketing executive. And Elf on the Shelf was sitting in the Christmas tree. And I remember standing at that event and just feeling so unbelievably proud of the fact that I was in a client's place at the invitation of another client, and sitting beside her was my first ever paid client. And it was a bit of a, wow, I've actually done this. This is actually what I do now for a living. And to be in a room of influencers to try and help Peter McVerry with the campaign that they were doing with Mars Pharmacy. It was just it's weird because it's not even a great picture, but for me, it's very important to me that I keep that picture. So I moved into more speaking and training than taking over people's social media and doing it for them. And that was such a relief. And I realized that that's what I wanted to be doing with my time. I didn't want to be sitting down crafting posts and campaigns that were kind of unappreciated. You'd be begging clients for content. This is something that I don't know how much you've done in your course with dealing with real businesses, but it is painful to try and get them to send you pictures, send you news, send you something. Send me a video and they'll send you half an hour in landscape when you needed it for Instagram stories. And then you'll get nothing at all if you complain. So I moved more into speaking and training because I could scale that up and do it online. So I did travel the country training people and businesses all over the place. I worked with businesses, community organizations, politicians. I love speaking engagements to groups of people because and even this kind of thing this morning, I really love this kind of stuff because if you can turn it into a story, I don't necessarily tell this story at all those talks, but say the bottom right picture there is the Irish League of Credit Unions directors having an AGM for 2 or 3 days in a hotel. They had a rough night the night before. I think, were planning on having a little nap during my talk. Social media, yeah, we should be doing social media. But I gave them the context of what a credit union should be doing on social media, not all the bells and whistles. The talk I was asked to give was the best time to post on social media. Like, what do you say? Wednesday at 4:30? There's no answer to that. So I put up the first slide with the title of the talk they'd given me, and then I literally said, not going to talk about that. And I talked about what credit unions should be doing to compete with what banks are doing, to be that voice of the community that a credit union really is. So I always, in those talks and in those workshops and in those trainings, make it tailored to the group I'm speaking to, and I still love that kind of work. So now Revenue Digital is just that. I don't actually take over anyone's social media for them anymore. I came back from Web Summit in 2018 and realized that one client had finished up with me before I left, as agreed, and it was expected, and it was totally fine. And I wasn't in a hurry to replace them because I needed a bit of breathing space. But then another one, for financial reasons, had to stop. And then another one changed from me to another provider because that other agency was watching my stories every day, saw that I was in Lisbon at Web Summit and thought, right, we'll pounce now. So went in and made him an offer he couldn't refuse, undercut me on price, and stole him out from under me. So that was 3 gone in a week for different reasons, but 3 gone in a week. And I remember just thinking, this just still feels so unstable. And I moved more into the speaking and training end of things. And even then, I was torn between, it doesn't have to be a choice, being employed or being self-employed. And it's another misconception that I don't know where I got it from, that if I got a job, I would be giving up on myself, that I'm an entrepreneur. I don't follow anybody's rules. I'm my own crazy person. I'm just come up with wacky ideas and, oh, sure, I might make money someday. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can be entrepreneurial and employed. You can be sensible and wacky. You can make money and be broke. It can go all over the place. You don't have to box yourself into one thing. So in 2019, I had to make a decision. Was I going for this job at Shopify or not? And I actually went for 3 jobs at the same time. I went for one in a hotel, where the reason I didn't get it was, this is for sales and marketing manager in a hotel. And I'd had several hotel clients over the years and shown them phenomenal work that I'd done. One of the interviews was to go in and pitch a campaign, and I did, and their jaws were on the floor, and I still didn't get it. And I was told that the reason I didn't get it was that they reckoned there was no way I was going to stay in one place Monday to Friday, week after week, that I was into too many different things, and that they reckoned, not that I was too good for them, but that I was too, my portfolio was kind of too diverse, and why would I hone myself in on one thing? I was like, that's exactly what I need, is to focus on one thing. So I didn't get that. The other one was in the education sector, and I pulled out of the second interview for that because I got Shopify. So the third one I was going for was Shopify. I'd used their platform so much, and I knew, like I say, it's so accessible in that it's for a very established business. It's for somebody just starting up. It's for somebody who just makes something at the kitchen table, wants to sell a few. It's for somebody who has global ambition. It's for everybody. And I just loved their company ethos as well. So with Shopify, the things that really sold it to me was that it's 100% remote. So this chair and this desk is where I work 40 hours a week for Shopify. So I have no commute. So I live in Cavan. There's not a whole lot of tech companies popping up around Cavan. So the opportunity to work full-time for a company like Shopify, or as big as Shopify, does not come up too often. I have no childcare costs now. Even when I was working for myself, I paid for after-school care for my kids, because otherwise they came in from school and all they saw was the back of my laptop and me on the phone going, I'm on the phone. And that's not being present. So they were better off going to a crash and doing their homework and having their dinner and me picking them up at 6 and trying to be somewhat present with them. But that costs me money. And now I don't have to do that because I work 7 to 3. So they come in from school, I'm finished work, and I actually have this work-life balance thing that everybody talks about. They're people driven. So they're not driven by numbers and targets and sales. They come as a consequence of how we actually do support. We're not tech support, we're people support. So we talk the entrepreneur through their challenges, and obviously there's technical things on the dash, click here, press that, but it's not just that kind of support. We take it into a human conversation every time. That's so important to me. Their diversity and equality. So I've mentioned already that those things are really important to me, and they're genuinely important to them as a company, not just in how they recruit or what their workforce looks like, but also things like that you can become a Shopify merchant and give yourself an opportunity, and you don't have to be from a certain background, or you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to be, it definitely, it brings it back to all those things of why e-commerce changed my life, because it was so accessible. So somebody with a disability, somebody who is from maybe a disadvantaged background, where if they went to start a business in the traditional channels would be laughed at. But this is one of the beauties of Shopify, is that anybody can start a business. They encourage entrepreneurship. Yeah, entrepreneurship is the word. So I don't have to make this stark choice between putting all my ideas to bed. They actively encourage that, and they want us to be entrepreneurial so that we can empathize with the people we're supporting. The salary and perks and benefits, knowing when payday is, knowing that the health insurance is taken care of, knowing that there's all sorts of perks and benefits there. We earn them, but just knowing that they're there and taken care of, and that I don't have to hunt anybody down for an invoice, is the icing on a lovely cake. There's the security and stability of that. And then there are still opportunities for growth within Shopify. I'm with them since July, and I don't have any clear trajectory of I want to do this and then that'll get me to there. But I do know that within it, there are endless possibilities. And again, when does that come up in Cavan? So it's amazing. So I'm not wealthy, but I'm not constantly anxious about money anymore, the way I was, because of this, like that, the stability, just knowing what date things are hitting the bank account. So my title is, I'm a Shopify customer success guru. And I know I cringe at the word as well, but that's what we're called. And I could never have dreamed that I'd be so happy in a full-time employment and still able to do my own thing on the side. So I have no idea how we're doing for time.
Fantastic, Michelle. That's been great. Such a journey. Oh my goodness. You've really brought it full circle from the table and all the challenges. And I love, you've been so honest, because, some people in the class, I think, are thinking of the whole entrepreneurial side. And oftentimes it does come across as quite glossy, or, people see you at the awards, or they see you on social media or Instagram or whatever the case is. But I think Michelle has given a real insight into the background in the context of people not paying, which is something myself and everyone really as an entrepreneur comes across. And it is challenging, because you're trying to be creative, innovative, and all those sort of things, and give good customer service and do a good job. And it's soul destroying when you have to go chasing people, which sometimes you do as such.
Yeah, it's humiliating. It's
Yes.
humiliating to have to ask for your money when you know that you've earned it. So, I mean, you would never in any job have to go and ask for your wages.
Yeah.
It's just a given that they go in on a certain day. And it really is your wages, because that's what you're going to feed your family with, is when that invoice is paid. And it's always the ones who could afford to pay who don't.
Yes, yeah.
And it's, if you take it back to the communities we're both in, Emma, like, it's okay to say that out loud in front of certain people and say, like,
Correct.
we're all in the same boat, but it doesn't make it any better when it
No,
happens. It
no.
doesn't make it any easier when your own direct debit bounces because you thought there would be money in there to meet it and somebody else let you down.
Yeah,
That gets passed on. You can't do certain things, you can't pay for certain things until they cough up.
yeah.
um, and it's a difficult conversation to have. And then Ireland's small,
Yes,
Cavan's
correct.
small, so you're literally bumping into these people or seeing them farting about the place, enjoying themselves, and you're like, that's well for you there now.
Yeah.
And then it's hard not to begrudge people.
Yes, yeah.
And maybe they didn't pay you because someone didn't pay them,
Yeah,
but
it
but
becomes a cycle
it
then.
does become a cycle. And if you take it personally when you get compliments and testimonials and praise, then of course you're going to take it personally when you get that, get your proposal rejected, or somebody doesn't pay or won't answer the phone to you. Of course you're going to take it just as personally.
Yeah. I think one of the things to recognize here for the class might be that, and I've mentioned it quite a bit, is that this is where Google Analytics or Facebook Insights or reporting is very important. Even if you're not working for yourself, you've got to be able to prove what you're doing, because the challenge is in marketing, like Michelle says, is it's all well and good at the start, but when things start going wrong, or they're not making sales, or things aren't going well, which can happen for a while, sometimes it could be 2 months, and it might be nothing got to do with your marketing campaign. It could be like the coronavirus. Who could have predicted for that? And I suppose this is where you guys need to understand how to validate what you do, and to be doing that and not just look at the creativity side of it. Because the challenge is, when you do a service, whether you're working as an employee or whether you're paid as an agency or whatnot, is people may not value it, because the unfortunate aspect of it is they don't have to post, they don't have to create the content, they don't have to plan it out, they don't have to upload it. They don't realize that a small post on Facebook, which has the right hashtags, which you've had to research, that has the correct links, that you might have to do a branded bit.ly link, that you have to go and find the right picture for, that you might have to adjust that size, you've got to add in a logo, and these are all small little things that I'm mentioning, but you could talk about 2 or 3 hours work sometimes into one post. And of course, the reason you're doing that is because you recognize the different elements of that particular post will actually help that post become organically more viral. And people are delighted, then they're getting the likes, comments and shares, and they're getting engagement, whatever. But from what I suppose the point being here is that, because it's only seen as social media, is how relevant is it? So for example, when you post on Facebook, or when you write a blog, or when you do a YouTube channel or a podcast, or whatever it is that you're doing on social media, unfortunately there's no transaction, which means that there is no equation, like a monetary equivalent, to validate what you've done. So of course what happens is, like Michelle is describing, is you can do loads of really, really good work, and this again can be in a job situation, and if you don't actually document it, or even that they've never done it before, they don't recognize the lengths you'd have gone to actually get the results that you've got. And I've seen it myself, where you could get a lot of really, really great brand awareness, but it takes a while to build that trust. And it could take people up to 6 months before they actually buy. And what could happen is, in the meantime, that you could get fired as the employee, you could get fired as the agency, and actually what happens is, a month after you leave, or 2 months, or even a week after you leave, the sales start coming in, because it takes a while for people to take on board what a brand or a product or a service does. So your marketing that you were doing months or weeks in advance actually starts working a couple of weeks or months later, depending on the product or service. And that is the challenge. So I can't overemphasize enough, and I think it's great that Michelle has brought it up today in a very real way, that this is genuinely how it happens behind the scenes. And I suppose it can be misconstrued in, of course we can all look fabulous on Instagram or Facebook or whatever the case might be, and that's great, but you can't cash in a blog, unfortunately, or you can't go to the bank with your Facebook post, or whatever the case is. So just to remember that. So thanks for that. And I love, the fact that you've been on Dragon's Den, Michelle, and had your son. I was laughing at that, at the birthday aspect of it. And I can see, and I think then as well that, to bring it home to people, that being featured in newspapers is just not about being featured in newspapers. It's about bringing that onto digital and sharing it, as you rightly say. When I never buy a newspaper anymore, but that's not to say other people don't.
And thanking the journalist. A lot of people do this kind of relationship building, maybe not in a genuine way, maybe always with the ask in mind, and just retweet them a couple of times there and then message them with, hey, would you ever mention me, or, blah, blah, blah. And then if they do get the mentions somewhere, they just go bragging about it to their followers, to their customers, and never say thank you for that. Sending a thing of cupcakes into the office if it was a particularly good thing, that means the world to them. Journalists are only doing their job as well, because they're well known and they've got lots of Twitter followers and stuff, because they're breaking news to us all the time. They're still just people doing their job. So if something nice lands into their office, obviously not in the age of social distancing, but without becoming a total stalker, just showing that appreciation. And even if that is just to reply to their tweet of the article with thank you so much, it means so much to you, but tell them that. And then that appreciation, keeps that relationship going past that particular mention.
Yeah, which is so important. And actually, funny enough, I've had, Elaine Carl from the All Ireland Business Summit. Elaine was on 2 weeks ago, and she very much had the same idea around the relationship building. And I think it's something that's often overlooked, particularly with digital marketing. It's seen as all this high tech or using all these platforms, but sometimes it's a case of, as you say, sending cupcakes, sending just a thank you, just being human and recognizing people and their work and whatnot. So which is very basic in one sense, but also very, very important. That we recognize these people are human, as you say, and also that they're just doing their job. And if they've done something for you, just to recognize that. Because the thing is, particularly with journalists, and if you're in marketing all the time, you will need to ask them for stuff again. And if you can be helpful, you might need them for a year or 6 months, or it could be next week, whatever the case is. So at least they'll remember you kindly if you did send them a cupcake or a thank you or whatever it is. It's not a case of, here's your one again, and I know she wants something.
Actually, well, when I say cupcakes, I did that with one newspaper who actually covered a story in the school. So not even anything to do with any business. But I was on the board of the school, and there was a story breaking that was definitely positive, good news that had been 20 years in the running, that we were finally getting a permanent building and everything. But they gave it amazing coverage here locally, like in a really positive way. And the way sometimes they have to do what they have to do to sell. The same as clickbait brings clicks, headlines about bad news or planning permission or how it was going to affect traffic. They could have put some spin on it as to, oh Jesus, look what's going to happen now. But they were 100% positive about it, and it was a lovely story. And it was an appreciation for that. That was the thank you cupcakes. But that does keep them sweet, for when I do need
your picture.
Sorry. Here. Sorry about that. Just the two are coming. We've Sarah. Actually, do you want to just come on and just ask yourself, Sarah? Sarah has a question there for you.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us. I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for kind of getting the tone right when you're portraying a brand on social media? Because we're all used to doing our own social media, but obviously it's different when you're kind of portraying a brand, and kind of as well dealing with negative consumer feedback on social media, because I've seen some brands deal with that really well, but then it can be tricky to kind of get the right things.
So 2 great questions, and they kind of go together, because how you would deal with negative feedback should fit the tone. So if the tone is that they're kind of a cheeky brand, with a really kind of extrovert personality, then you can get cheeky with the customer feedback. You can reply to that complaint with, something that's like, well, we don't have any record of your stay here, or I'm sure where they reply to the negative feedback, but they call them out on it if it's not valid, or if they just feel like defending themselves. the tone question is one, it's a conversation to have at the very, very beginning. When you're setting those expectations with a client, you have to ask them, what is the tone of voice? And a lot of them will look at you very blankly and be like, what does that even mean? But it's very important. So you can use things like, okay, if your, we'll say, pub was a person who it was a celebrity, who would they be, right? If it was a car, what would it be? So see, do they go for things like luxury, high end, or do they go with the family regular thing? Do they go with a celebrity who has a particular tone? So sometimes they can't imagine what tone of voice even is, but it is there. So if you can give them other things that they do understand, like other brands, like cars, celebrities, sometimes you have to throw in a bit of a survey there with just what seems to them like very random questions, but it should give you some indication of where they place themselves in that context of tone of voice. And then for the first few, I would say draft a couple of different posts and run it by them. Even if that's not part of the agreement that they have to approve every post, just say, look, until we find our feet here, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with this tone of voice. So do you like A or B? You know, and just push the boundaries a little bit in one and rein it back in another, and just see, do they want to play it safe? Are they okay with something sounding a little bit casual? Do they want it more formal? Where are they actually comfortable? But involve them in the process.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks, Michelle. Has anybody else any questions? Anybody else?
I wonder,
Great. Thanks, Sean.
managing Facebook pages after a certain point of like they built up and they got hard to manage too many of them. How many would you recommend? Like, I know each one would be different, but how many was too many?
So it wasn't how many Facebook pages, it was how many clients. And like there was one client where I just had their Shopify store and their Facebook page, and they were more work than 3 other clients put together because they were just difficult, right? So everything had to be run by them. They wanted an instant response from me on everything that they asked me, but they couldn't be got for 3 hours when I had a question for them. Do you know that those kind of I ended up firing that client. It was the only time I ever actually said to somebody, this is not going to work out. And I switched it up to training somebody who worked for her to do it instead, and kind of said, look, there's how to do it. The very best of luck to you. Some people are more work than the project itself. So there's no exact number of Facebook pages that's too much, because you could have one where you could schedule the posts out for a week, tip in and out of the messages every morning, and you'd be grand. And for that, again, you might have to be constantly on engagements all the time, you know. If something blows up, so you could have a scheduled post that you thought was going to do okay, and it might actually go completely viral, especially if there's any sort of a giveaway or a competition, or if the comments sections blow up, you might have to get in there and moderate them so that things don't get out of hand, because sometimes commenters will have a go at each other, and this is all happening on your page. So sometimes there's more work in a page and sometimes there's less. So I wouldn't say it's a number of Facebook pages or even clients to manage, it's the workload involved in them.
Great answer.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I had a question.
Hi, Rowan.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Michelle, for such a wonderful talk. It was really very enriching to hear your experience. So my question is that how did you handle so many things in a very great manner, like your family and your business, and then getting those ideas and monetizing those ideas? So how did you deal with those steps where you had to manage your family also as well, then manage with your ideas also, and then get going with the ideas?
I didn't sleep. I think that's the only answer, and I wouldn't recommend it. I'm telling you, that's what my story was, but I wouldn't set out to do it like that again. It was crazy times. It was my entire 20s. It was just crazy, and I think if you knew going into an idea or a project or a business that this is not going to make money, but it's going to teach me loads of things, you probably wouldn't do it. So if I knew that these things were going to fail financially and not make money, not get investment, not get credit, then I don't know if I would have still gone ahead and done them for the fun of it. But I don't regret it. So it's really, I don't watch TV. I don't get a lot of sleep. I put my time into, you can also crisscross those things. So the kids can learn from you watching you work. It's not healthy mentally if those things are getting you down. But if those things are exciting you and that's where your passion is, well, then you might as well be doing that as watching Netflix, you know? So it's about cutting out things out of your day that are nothing to do with your family or your business. If your family and your business are your passions, that's enough. You don't need silly hobbies or to go to the pub on a Sunday and spend all day watching football, drinking beer. That was, you know, there's people waste their time. Everybody has the same number of hours in a day, and people waste their time with nonsense, and they're just doing it as an escape to numb themselves away from their life. Whereas I've kind of filled up every hour with crazy stuff, but what I wanted to do with my time, and I never felt like I had to escape it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Rowan. And I think they're great points to make as well, Michelle, because you know, it is, if you like, probably before they started the masters, maybe people wouldn't have started if they realized the amount of work involved. I mean, who knows? You know, it's like everything. You have children. If you knew how much work was involved, would you have them? I don't know. Sounds terrible, but you know, there's all these things, isn't there, in life that they teach you great things. You know, you learn great things, and like Michelle was saying, you know, all of what she learned along the way worked at that time for her, but also brought her to where she is now. Because, you know, if you were 21 or 22 or whatever the case is, and were looking to work with Shopify without those experiences, you know, you would have it would be a huge steep learning curve, because you can't beat actually being there on the other end of, you know, dealing with issues with deliveries, dealing with just the practicality of what is the brand, like what is that brand tone, as you say, what does that mean? And sometimes you can do that intuitively as a business owner. And of course, you know, because you know what it means, and sometimes it can be difficult to convey that to other people, or vice versa, if you're the agent for them to explain to you what does that mean. So these are all kind of learnings that we have as we go. And actually, I remember when I did my undergrad, because I went back as a mature student to do my business degree in UL, and in third year they do like you go out and get work experience. And I had done that because I did it in reverse, as you do, but I did work experience first for a number of years and then went back to college or whatever the case was. But I was fascinated when the other students came back from the work experience, and they were like, yeah, it was a bit different from the theory, you know?
Yeah.
You know, in particular, I remember there was one guy, and, you know, when you do HR or like, it's like, you know, organizational behavior and whatnot. So like you learn, this is how people react. This is the type or different types of people. This is how they react in particular situations. And one guy was like, yeah, there was like one of the customers had a meltdown one day. They ended up working in Aldi, and, you know, I tried everything I'd learned, but then I just had to use common sense. But, you know, where they were applying principles that they learned. And of course, that is the challenge oftentimes. I think probably
and sometimes you have
to
translate, so you can understand the principle in theory, but you have to translate it for the nuance of the situation.
Yes.
So there's things where if you use too Americanized language, if somebody's having a meltdown in an Aldi in Limerick, you have to speak to them in their tone of voice and literally their colloquialisms to calm them down. You can't say, oh, what I'm hearing here is that you maybe are having a difficult time. You're only going to add fuel to the fire. So you can understand the principle of the thing here is that they're having a really shitty day. They're taking it out on us. The problem is not actually the faulty product. The problem might be that their world has fallen apart. They're off their meds. There's something here out of my control, but there's a way of managing this conflict that suits the situation. And that does not always come from a book.
No.
Identifying what's wrong might, but then you have to use the right communication.
Yeah, and that's actually a great example, because I spoke to the class as well, and it's a great example there where language is incredibly important. So the language, and that comes back into tone as well, but even the words that you would use. So if I marketing to, I was doing some work there with an agricultural brand, like a farming brand, and of course what was happening was it was a technical product, but it was being marketed to farmers. And of course the challenge there was, they're a startup, it's exciting, but then farmers are going, Asher, what's that now? What's that crack they're at? And they're too highfalutin for us, like with their...
Come back to me when you're established.
Yeah, and they only launched last September. And it was interesting that the business, in their heads, they were going to be inundated with farmers wanting to buy the product before Christmas, and they got an award in September at the planning championships and whatever, but it didn't quite translate. So it was interesting at the start, before I'd arrived on the scene, they'd already spoke, because they actually came from farming background, but then they switched it up because they were going for all these awards, and they focused on the startup element of it. And I was like, well, if you're marketing to the farmers, they've got to know that you understand their needs, because it's very niche. And I said, if you are going to go with very technical language, you're going to turn them off. I mean, I'm from farming background, so I actually would adapt. I worked in sales a lot, like direct sales, and you learn, like if I was speaking to somebody from Dublin 4, and if you're not from Ireland, because a number of the students are from China and different countries here, Dublin D4, as it's referred to in Dublin, is one of the most expensive places you can buy in Ireland, and you're considered to be very posh. And I wouldn't go, well, how's it going, to somebody from D4, because they were like, oh, she's a real culture, she's really from the country. And the inherent thing there is this person doesn't understand me. So I would say, how's it going to a farmer? And like, I learned to drive in a tractor and trailer, and I know the language, I know the lingo, I can very quickly adapt what I'm saying to them. But the challenge there can be to, in your marketing, to bring that across.
I think video is key there.
Yes.
Because copy is great, but if somebody gets a sense of the authenticity there, where you say in a certain accent or language, that this is, I get you. And if the person can't do that themselves, even to hire somebody to be the voiceover, to be the face of the brand, and to do that video, it doesn't cost the earth. Sometimes you can get, a student from multimedia course or something like that who needs that kind of production experience. Mm-hmm. But once you can have the right visuals and audio, then the words will land properly. Yeah. So they'll read it and think, yeah, do I believe that though? Whereas if a human face is actually saying those words, and you can take it further then, that they're saying it while walking through a field, or, and really set the scene as well as set the tone. But I think video, even just talking into a phone, as soon as there's some sort of congruent message, it makes so much more sense to people, and think, okay, I could trust him. I could, or I'll take her word for it. Yeah. And they'll take that call to action. Whereas just reading it, we don't know.
Yeah. And it's actually the challenge. I think that's where the digital actually, sorry. That's a toothbrush, a Peppa Pig toothbrush going in there, branding at its finest. But like that, I find, it interesting, because I come from a very sales background. I've worked in a variety of different industries and whatnot. And, just to bring up, when people are giving out, actually, I tend to, you can do this obviously in person, or would say if it's on a Facebook post, is acknowledge. You'll learn that anyway, and I'm sure the guys have learned it in their different classes, is you acknowledge the issue, say, I see where you're coming from, or I hear where you're coming from. I'll pick up, I'll PM you, I'll direct message you, whatever platform it's on, I'll email you, I'll get your phone number, and I'll ring you. And I think that can really help, because there's that video thing, because they see you face to face. And I see that all the time, actually, because particularly in the online space, I'm sure you see this as well, Michelle, is where there's a lot of marketers out there. They do a really good job of fabulous photos. Their websites look amazing. The copy is really good. They've done this and that and the other, and people buy from them. But actually, when you hear them, you think, gosh, they're not quite what you think. So in other words, and I don't know, do you remember Blab? There was
Blab.
It
was a bit like this.
Yeah, very like this. And actually, funny enough, the guys are doing their group project, and one of Moises and shown in that I'll send on some of the links to you, Michelle, but they've done a really great job, I think, in that they've 4 people speaking, or 3 rather speaking, and then they're doing Batman, they're doing reviews of movies and whatnot, but they actually have Batman as one of the characters in like the 4 people on the screen and whatnot. But I just think it's interesting where you can't replicate that just in text. Whereas when I went in and watched them, I smiled because, you know, there was all the different personalities, the way they're sitting, they're very relaxed, they're into it, the passion around the topic that they have, it's innovative, it's creative. It's very hard to get that across, whereas with video, you know, it's much easier. And like you were saying, Michelle, with the agricultural aspect of it, it's easier to bring it across. And equally, if you were talking to somebody from D4, or if I was speaking to somebody in China or in wherever it might be, I have to adapt what I'm saying. Or equally, like this is obviously University of Limerick course, so therefore if I was speaking to some of the lecturers, I would adapt my language in that I probably would use more journal articles or more academic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I have to watch myself then that I don't do that with clients, because some people think you're too highfalutin if you use certain words. It's the reverse snobbery,
it's
and
jargon.
And jargon as well. So I have to be really careful that I don't. And I'm in my head sometimes I'm trying to think, because I have baby brain sometimes, like what's an alternative word to whatever it is that doesn't make people feel like that I'm talking down to them.
So in any given day, I could have calls from all over the world, one after the other, and you have to find what the tone is first of all, because they're just calling this Shopify number. They don't know that they're getting through to Michelle in Ireland, right? And I have to first of all unpack what we call the baggage, where they might be coming in a little bit hot and heavy because they're annoyed, they're stressed, the thing is broken, blah 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 blah. It's not broken, they're just not thinking clearly or pressing the right buttons. Sometimes it's as simple as they need to clear their browser cache, you know, but it's all Shopify's fault, blah, blah, blah. And you have to just have a kind of okay, give them a minute, let them get it off their chest. And like, you're listening, but you're active listening. So I do everything online. We're total paperless. I don't have to print anything. There's no paper involved. But I have to have a notebook and a pen if I'm taking calls, because I have to scribble down keywords that they're saying that I think, okay, remember he said that, remember he said that, remember he said that, and then echo it back to them. And it's a very basic psychological thing. When you and I are speaking face to face, we'll actually mirror each other's behavior without realizing it. When you're only over the phone and you can't see them, that's the best way to do it then, is just mirror their language and use their words back to them. Mm-hmm. Now, some places, like we're not like any other support, and I know I'm very biased because I work for Shopify, but we're really not like any other support.
I have to say, Michelle, they're obviously giving you an extra bonus here.
Because I'm actually off this week, and here I am like, I love Shopify. Why was I saying I love them this time? We're not like any other support in that we don't have scripts, we don't have, you know, things that we just say, oh yeah, okay, give them answer A, B, or C. Like it's a real human conversation. And so many times recently, I've had to contact support over different things, for phone companies, insurance, trying to sort out all my mother-in-law's admin stuff because she can't call into me now. And I feel so sorry for people who are in those jobs, who are just so bored with their own existence, that they say, yes, I hear the problem, I totally understand where you're coming from, blah, 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 but they don't mean it.
Yeah. So
you have to actually mean it. So I can give you all these tips of things to say, how to say it, but you have to actually mean it, or it's pointless. So they're saying, you know, yeah, I totally see where you're coming from, I can see the problem, we'll take it up from here, or we'll escalate it to here, or we'll whatever. They just want to get rid of you. And that's all the customer is feeling. So if you had things that you were kind of copying and pasting in as, say, a response to negative feedback or complaints or something, like, I mean, I've dealt with a hotel who had a flood of negative reviews because they were the venue for an artist who was under attack from an animal rights group.
Wow.
So they were like, right, we'll
break up a row here, hang on a second.
we'll hit the venue where it hurts then, and we'll destroy their star ratings. So what should the venue do there? You know, it's not even feedback on their product or service. It's, you shouldn't be doing business with this completely third party. So you do have to have a kind of an emergency policy in place for when those things happen, because there's no straightforward answer. if you just copy and paste the same answer to every single bad review, then they know that that's all you're doing. So you have to change up the wording to every single one so it looks like you're dealing with each one individually. There's also a culture out there where people leave complaints to get a discount, to get a voucher, to get a refund. You know, there's scams out there where people will sabotage your site or your social media with negative reviews and kind of say, well, pay us X and we'll remove them. Or they're doing it just, like I say, to get a discount or to get a voucher. It's very common in the hospitality industry, where people will leave poor TripAdvisor reviews in the hopes that the manager will contact them and say, please come back and have a 3-course meal for free. Or, you know, so you have to be very careful too that you're not bound down to that kind of stuff either, that it is genuinely negative feedback. And what I respect the most in a business is if they take the negative feedback and use it and say, okay, maybe we need to retrain that member of staff. Maybe we need to look at how many we have on duty on a Saturday night. Maybe we need to look at, you know, are we rostering enough staff? You know, if people are being left, if their complaint is that they were left 40 minutes before their food arrived, do we have enough people on? And it could be as simple as replying to that publicly and saying, we've taken what you've said on board, we're incorporating this into our training plan, and we really appreciate your feedback. And then do your, please come back to us, you know, next day is free, or dessert is on the house, or whatever the treat is. But I also think it's really important to publicly acknowledge them, even if you're taking it to a private message or a phone call, or it's being taken away from the public Facebook review or TripAdvisor review. Still reply to that publicly, because other people are reading that. And if it looks like you didn't even respond, they don't know that you privately messaged them, sorted it all out, and gave them the sun, moon, and stars. And it's also okay to say to somebody who's given a negative review and you've dealt with it and it's now put to bed and everyone's happy again, and say to them, we'd appreciate a positive review if you get a chance. That if things have been put right, they're not always so quick to come back in and go, well, guys, wait till I tell you, they actually sorted everything out. So it's okay to ask for that. You may or may not get it. But negative reviews, like, it's funny the way people trust strangers on the internet over the business themselves. So you can have the About Us page, the lovely photographs, this is who we are, this is what we do. One negative review on TripAdvisor. If there's loads of 5s and loads of 4 stars, no 3s or 2s, and a few 1s, where do you go? You jump straight into the 1s. What happened? What's wrong? So it's really important to actively engage with them in some way, and not a copy and paste response.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Is there any other questions from any of the students? Somebody's just coming in. Is there any other questions? It's kind of coffee break time, so I think they're looking for coffee or tea or whatever it is they're typical at this hour of the morning. Michelle, I'd really like to thank you very much. You've really covered an awful lot of content there in terms of, I think, very relevant situations that arise, and I think they'll be very thankful to you, not just right now, but in 6 months or a year's time when they're in a job, and they'll recognize situations that you've actually described here today. So I'd like to thank you very much, because sometimes I think, we, in general, business owners or entrepreneurs, give a very glorified view of what, and I think you've shown both sides, where the awards, the really nice elements of it, but equally the reality of how do you deal with certain situations, which is business as it is, like, the real life situations, which as marketers that we have to deal with. So thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your time, because you are off this week and you've given your time to all of us here this morning.
You're getting me out of gardening and parenting and all sorts of things, so it's fine.
I'm still semi doing that, so I'm not really quite doing anything much. Yeah. The joys of it. But yeah, no, thank you, Michelle. I really, really appreciate you coming here this morning. So, and I think I know the rest of the students do as well, because they were really looking forward when they heard that somebody from Shopify, they were in e-commerce, they were really excited to hear you this morning.
Yeah, if there's any questions about Shopify itself or e-commerce itself, like the technical stuff, they can message me after or whatever. It's not hard to find me. Yeah, I suppose sometimes people have questions about, is it suitable for particular types of businesses? I'm getting that a lot lately, because there's businesses who just didn't think e-commerce was necessary for them, are now forced into it because of COVID. And I don't think Shopify markets itself as the platform for everything. It's very product based. And you don't have to have a product business at all. Like we've had this conversation, Emma. I always had my service-based business on there. And you've probably been on loads of Shopify stores and didn't know there were Shopify stores, depending on what way they're laid out. But yeah, it's a crazy time for us for sure.
Definitely, I think for marketing, but it's good as well that, you know, you guys are actually really busy, and I see actually a number, even local businesses here where I'm from, they are going on Shopify or suddenly realizing, oh my goodness, you know, I was onto a shoe shop yesterday and they're not on anything, you know, bar Facebook, and I'm like, I need shoes, but it's very limited what they can do on Facebook. So they really need something like Shopify, and beauticians put themselves up on Shopify. And actually my 10-year-old daughter, who I don't know if she's made an appearance yet, but anyway, cameo appearances going on here this morning. But she actually started her Shopify account last week, which I was laughing at, because she wants to sell pictures online. So she wants to be a millionaire, she tells me, and is busy out in the garden taking pictures. I have to check and see how far she's got. But she had found Wix, because I said to her, I'm not helping you to start off with, go and find and see what your research brings you. And so she found Wix to start with, and then decided that didn't quite work. And then she found Shopify by herself, actually, funny enough. So she already had it created when I realized what she had done. So I'll be interested to see what she's actually created. But it just goes to show, though, that, you know, for it doesn't matter what age you are or what you're looking to sell, that there is, you know, there's scope there within Shopify to do a lot of things, I would say. Absolutely.
I had a guy the other day who was, you have to be 18 to run a store, so she'd have to have like you as the account owner or whatever.
Yes, she was falsely putting down her date of birth because she went on something else and realized that. So I think, I can't remember what date of birth.
That'll be fine until she goes to get paid. And then
that's what I said to her, which was really funny, because then she said, how do I get paid, mommy? And I was like, now you see, you've lied about your age. Now you can't get paid. What?
Well, there was an underage guy last week, and he just had questions about how to set it up and how to get paid, whatever. And I said, he said his dad was willing to go in with him. And I said, that's great. So I just told him, you know, your dad's email address goes here. They were both on the bank account, all was fine. And then he said, I knew all this already, and I told him this, but he needed to hear it from Shopify. And I said, oh, okay, listen, everybody's nearby right now because everybody's at home. If he's nearby, put him on. I'm more than happy to answer all his questions, you know. And he's like, yeah, you've been on speaker the whole time. Which was fine, except for when he said, what happens when I turn 18 and want to take it over? I had said, listen, don't piss your dad off between now and then, right? Because supposing this does really well and it's turning over loads of money, and he says, why would I sign this over to you? So keep your dad sweet, do your chores, empty the dishwasher, don't annoy him. And then didn't know that I was on speaker the whole time. So oh yeah, you've been on speaker the whole time with him here. I was like, hi dad. Yeah, so you know, we do get that a good bit. People who are not 18 looking to start up, which is great to see. Like, do you know, when I go back to that slide of me at 15 with our little ID cards.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway.
My sister had mine for many years a year, but anyway, yeah, that's great. Look, thank you so much, Michelle. You know, really, really appreciate you coming in. You've given a lot of your time, like 2 hours. My goodness. You know, so really, really appreciate it. And there's lots of gems of wisdom for everyone here. So some of them couldn't come on board because some of them are gone back to China and different things. But I have this as a recording, so I'll pop it into our Facebook group and they can listen in later. But really, genuinely, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time here.
No worries. Nice to meet you all. Bye, Emma.
Bye. Okay, guys, that was a long one there until 12. So what I will do is, if it's okay with you, I spoke with some of the groups, and I'll be speaking with more of you tomorrow and the day after. Pixels and remarketing are two aspects that, first of all, came up within the groups, but also it will be something that you will definitely need when you finish. It's an area that's not terribly well known in digital marketing, and I think you know, it's going to be very important. Even if you don't see it quite now, you will recognize that it's going to be very important in a couple of months' time for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do recording, if that's okay with everybody, of remarketing pixels, but also remarketing actually videos as well, because obviously you're all doing videos right now. I have a speaker lined up, actually 2 speakers for next week. One of them is on at 11. I'm hoping to get the other one to agree to be on at 10. So what I was going to do was pop the 2 recordings for remarketing and pixels into the group, if that's okay, on Facebook, so that we can finish up now, if that's all right. And I suppose really partly it's because, as you can see, my 2-year-old daughter managed to fall off a couch there at the weekend. We've been in A&E and she's just getting very cranky there at the moment. So apologies for her coming in the middle of the talk there. But I don't think I'll be able to keep her quiet for another hour. So is that okay with everyone if I do recordings, pop them into the Facebook group? You can watch them when you're ready at your own leisure. But what I was going to do was maybe start at 9 or 9:30 next Wednesday. And then if you have any questions then that you could ask me then. Would that suit everybody?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rowan. Does that suit everybody? Can everybody hear me? You can take off the mute. I'll mute
Yeah,
you.
that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Fiona. That'd be great if that's okay with everybody. And just literally, I think it's been a long session today, and I know you guys are under pressure and different things as well, so it just might work. What I would say is just keep your content coming out, like in terms of your groups or your group project. Make sure that the context of it is, you know, so in other words, like the questions you're asking there about the tone, you know, that's all on brand. I think you're doing it anyway. So just to reiterate, make sure the links are done properly. Make sure you're consistently marketing every day. You can change things up a bit. Make sure you've got links in. I just noticed 1 or 2 of you, which I forgot to mention yesterday, if you've got Instagram, like you're telling people to log on to Instagram or go to your Twitter page or LinkedIn page, have the exact link. People are lazy, or, you know, if they go to put in at whatever the name of the group project is, they'll forget or they'll misspell it, they won't be able to find it, and they just won't follow you guys. If you've got a link there, they just click the link and they're gone straight through and they'll just follow or like you or whatever the case might be. So just to make sure, that's just a tip that I've learned over the years, that you have to be so explicit. People just don't have the time, they don't have the interest, and even when they do, they still either don't realize or forget. So just to remember to do things like that. And I suppose the reason I'm bringing up remarketing or retargeting, it's the same thing, just to reiterate that. And that's really where, just to remind you if you're not sure again, that's where you set up your pixel on Facebook, or you can set up retargeting or remarketing, it's called, on Google. And you can do it particularly for Google or for YouTube videos, which obviously YouTube is owned by Google. And the idea being that if somebody comes to watch your YouTube channel, they're then pixelated or retargeted to, so then you can send them another video or send them to a website if you want to. So you're retargeting them for a certain period of time. And really the idea being there that if somebody comes to your website, if they find you on Facebook, if they find you on YouTube, they're obviously interested in some context in what you're doing, whether you're selling, whether it's a podcast, whatever it might be, and you're wanting to retarget them. In other words, you're wanting to show them more content because they're putting up their hands basically saying, I'm interested. In a selling context, that's really, really important, because if they found you, that's great. Number one, they found your website, they found your YouTube channel, that's great. They've put their hands up in the sense that they've watched a video or they watched a certain element of it, or, you know, they've watched 10 minutes of it or 5 minutes of it or 10 seconds or whatever you set it out to be. That's important. So if you're trying to sell, that's really, really, really important. And that's going back to what Michelle was saying earlier, that genuinely speaking, it can be challenging at times in marketing, whereby you're doing all this work, like you're doing your podcast, you're doing your YouTube channel, you're doing your content marketing, but the sales mightn't be coming in as you'd like them to. Now, they might be dribbling in or whatever the case is. And retargeting, remarketing, whatever way you want to call it, it doesn't matter. It's the same concept. It's people, it's leads, it's people that have shown an interest in your product, your service, your podcast, your YouTube channel. And if you retarget them, you're showing them more content, they're more likely to buy from you. Not to forget that statistic that 80% of sales are made on the 5th follow-up. So that's where that comes in. So I can't emphasize enough. So what I would suggest is you watch the videos. We come on early, possibly 9, maybe I'll post it at 9 or 9:30 next Wednesday morning. That's Irish time. And then we have Christina at 11, and I'm hoping Gary will be on at 10. And what I'm hoping is that we get the work done first, and then we can kind of sit back and listen to the speakers, and if you have questions for them, and that's kind of for that particular session. Christina in particular she has an agency in the UK, marketing agency. She focuses massively on Google Ads, massively on Facebook ads. She actually has had to sign the Secret Act in the UK for one of her clients. So she had a government client, and in other words, so she can't obviously talk about it, she signed the Secret Act. So she has some very high level clients. She is a massive proponent of retargeting, remarketing. She's a great lady to listen to. She really knows her stuff. She's quite fun. And so I think she'd be really interesting to listen to. And then Gary is the guy that has the podcast. He's also very involved in startups, and I think that whole scene is very important to listen to or understand, because there'll be elements of that in no matter what business you end up working with. So I think there'll be two great speakers to listen to next week. But I would like that we're covering retargeting and that you're seeing it and that you're learning about it, because I think it's something that's very important. And also what it will tie in is what you've learned on Facebook Blueprint and what you're learning on Google Ads in terms of the certifications. All that knowledge will start to come together, pretty much like Michelle is describing to you. Sometimes it feels like, you know, marketing is so fragmented. You've Google Ads, you've Facebook ads, you've this, you've content marketing, you've so much going on. And when does it all start to come together? And it does, so don't panic. Okay, with that, if I can say